You know, this is story and imagination and telling our pasts and predicting our futures. That's the magic of why we get into this business.
I really wish I would have taken myself seriously as somebody who could make art earlier in my life. I didn't know anybody who made money creatively.
Audiences want to see things that are new. I want to go see a story I've never seen before, and that's what we're betting on.
As you join us today, we encourage you to reflect on the land that you're on and its history. We're located on the treaty lands and territory of the Mississaugas of the Credit and the traditional territory of the Anishinaabe, the Wendat, and the Haudenosaunee. The territory is within the lands protected by the Dish with One Spoon Wampum Belt Covenant and is home to many First Nations, Inuit, and Métis people. We're grateful to work on this land.
Hello. Delighted to have you here for this year's industry conference at the 2024 Toronto International Film Festival presented by Rogers. My name is Judy Lung, and I'm TIFF's Vice President of Strategy, Communications, and Stakeholder Relations. Thank you. It is such a pleasure to be here with you today to talk about one of my favorite topics, the future of film journalism, with a group of very esteemed journalists who have covered film festivals, and the industry. I started out as a film publicist some 20 years ago, and in that time, well, we all know how much has changed and the dramatic shifts we've seen across the industry. For film journalism, shifts and changes have been both slow and fast. And today, we want to explore and unpack here what the future holds for journalism as a profession, as a foundational component of festivals, and its relationship with audiences. Without further ado, let's meet our panelists. I'm going to start. Far left, Barry Hertz, film editor and chief film writer for the Globe and Mail, Canada's largest daily newspaper. Previously, he served as the executive producer of features for the National Post and was a manager and writer at Maclean's before that. He has a book coming out soon on the history and cultural impact of the Fast and Furious franchise. To Barry's right is Saffron Maeve. She's a Toronto-based critic, academic, and film curator. She is a contributor to Film Comment, Movie Notebook, The Globe and Mail, Toronto Star, CinemaScope, Screen Slate, and Le Cinema Club. As well, she's a member of the TFCA and the Society of LGBTQ Entertainment Critics. Presently, Saffron's also pursuing her MA at the U of T's Cinema Studies Institute. Hello, Saffron. Jourdain Searles is a writer, critic, film programmer, and comedian. She also just arrived this morning. Thank you, Jourdain. Her work focuses on film, comedy, feminism, and critical analysis. Jourdain has written for the New York Times, Vanity Fair, The Hollywood Reporter, Variety, Sight and Sound, GQ, IndieWire, Vulture, to name a few. Also a member of the Society of LGBTQ Entertainment Critics and the African American Film Critics Association. Welcome, Jourdain. And to my left is Jeremy Kay, who is Screen Daily's US editor based in LA, who told us earlier that this is his 18th festival, something to that effect. So I'm just gonna put it out here. Of our panelists, he has been to the most TIFFs so far. Thank you all for being here. So here we are, day 2 of TIFF 24. Let's start with a hyper-focus on film journalism and festivals. I'm going to direct some questions at specific panelists, and I'm going to let others sort of just sit, and somebody, we'll wait for someone to jump in. So I'm going to start with, I think, a question that we've all sort of been thinking about, film reviews. Film reviews during the festival. I'd love to hear from some who've done this for a few years, some who've done this for many, many years. What's changed, and for better or for worse, in terms of what are the needs for film reviews during a festival and afterwards? Jourdain.
Oh, okay. Well, I think over time, the thing that I've noticed the most is that there are less places to write for, which kind of has created this kind of climate where, you're trying to get work for those major outlets, but also a lot of people are self-publishing pieces more and more because of kind of like the lack of space or the lack of desire for capsule reviews. So the major trades continue, and I write for those, and those are pretty consistent. But in terms of some of like the smaller, more specialty places, they're not really around anymore, not sustained. So it's interesting because when I usually like write about films, I usually want to take as much time as I can and kind of learn as much as I need to, and try to make it kind of like a full body review, the kind of review that you can release at a festival, and then release it again when it has like when the film has a proper release. But lately, I keep on finding myself having to write shorter and shorter pieces. And then having to be like, I'm gonna expand later, but then sometimes based on like the grind and everything, it's a little bit harder. And I'm just rambling because this is actually a really hard question.
It is a really hard question. It's so simple. Let's stick with the trades for a second. Mm-hmm. Jeremy, you don't necessarily write reviews, but over the course of X number of years, from your perspective, how valuable are reviews? During the festival, before the festival, after the festival?
Yeah, review, can I just say, first of all, in deference to Barry, Barry's been here for 18 years. I'm not sure I've done 18 years, but maybe 15 or 16. But Barry's the king in terms of attendance.
My mistake.
I wouldn't want to take that crown. But, for us at Scream, it's a couple of things. First of all, a festival is a launch pad for a film, particularly one that doesn't come with the army of marketing and publicity that a studio will bring to all its releases. So you'll see small films here that are being released, they're playing in the festival, and they need as much attention as they can just to become a talking point, to get noticed. And particularly films that don't have distribution and are looking to get acquired. There's a lot of them in TIFF this year, and they need everything they can to get noticed, and a good review from a trade, certainly we find at Scream, will help. And if you write a bad review, we've noticed over the years, sales agents and publicists they'll have an opinion on that, because they really want to help you amplify that film. So it plays an important role. Festivals are a way of drawing attention to the art form, cutting through the noise, and allowing a film to stand out, which is the beginning of its career before it goes on to get a release. So very important.
You used a great word there, launchpad. So launchpad, obviously during the festival. I'm going to throw to Barry and Saffron maybe to talk about the launchpad function at a festival for maybe a more consumer-facing publication like yours.
Yeah, I think the Globe and Mail serves a very different kind of readership than the trades that are very much active here, in that these are general readers who I like to think are very highly engaged in culture and want to know what to look out for, what is going to be a talker, what is going to be kind of a conversation starter at a dinner party. So we kind of have to balance coverage of that, of getting people excited for things that we're excited about, and kind of putting a spotlight on artists that maybe don't have as much star power as those coming from kind of the Hollywood sphere, which is pretty much everyone working in the Canadian industry. And the benefit to that for us as well is that they're just that much more accessible. So in the lead up to TIFF, lately kind of the Globe's kind of coverage strategy has been to spotlight those kind of emerging artists, do features on that. We used to, for many years, do a big, huge capsule review roundup of as many films at TIFF as we could get our hands on, and we would review, and those like 50 to 100 word kind of chunks, and then collect them. And I mean, I loved it. It was a great feature that we could run in print all the time. We had a kind of interactive thing on digital, but the resources that go into that are immense, and kind of the ROI, to use a business term, is not so much. So we've had to step away from that, from a review function. So really, reviews during a festival for us is basically about us, myself and my kind of team of writers, seeing as much as we can, and then banking that material for review when a general release rolls around. And yeah, the sales, when it's a sales title, the sales agents and PR reps aren't too happy about that, because they want coverage now to generate those sales. But we deal with, finite resources, as a lot of other more mainstream non-trade publications certainly have come to encounter.
I'm going to look to Saffron on this next one, which is related. What do we lose if we don't have capsule reviews?
I think we lose attention to films that don't readily have distribution, films that would otherwise not be considered bigger titles, that might not be having the glitzier premieres. Those are the films that instinctively I look to review. I would prefer always to review a film that has yet to secure its distribution, in an effort to maybe help with that in some way. But I feel like in my experience, this is my 6th TIFF, and I've noticed that my ability as a freelancer to pitch those pieces is really going with the loss of capsules, because capsules are a very accessible mode of talking about something briefly and getting your feelings about it out there. So I am slightly apprehensive about the loss of it, but I also see practically why that happens, and it really just is a budgetary constraint.
Yeah, it seems like there's been just so much focus on lately, over time, just like the bigger films. It's all about the big names. It's all about the big films, and they're prioritized. And sometimes I'll pitch like a smaller film to a trade. I'll be like, I'm really interested in this. I want to write about this. And they'll just be like, I'm not sure. I'm not sure if there's interest. I'm not sure if there's room in the freelance budget to be talking about this. And it can be frustrating, because we come here to watch all of these films. Especially, I specifically come to TIFF to watch films from Canada, like made in Canada, so that I can see what's going on over here. And so it's interesting, like how editors are less interested in that, and kind of like more interested in kind of like stars. And I'm not sure why that shift is happening, really.
I think also the not the loss of capsule, but seeing in the past years, several publications kind of shuttering their capsule reviews. I'm noticing that dispatches are becoming all the more common. I'm often asked to write a dispatch of the entire festival, which is essentially a number of capsules for very little money.
Yeah.
So I think that's the direction that a lot of smaller publications have also had to go in. So I'm empathetic to that fact, but it definitely is, especially if you're coming from out of country, it can be a little demoralizing.
Yeah, I just wrote like my first dispatch last year. I didn't even really know that those were things that we had to do.
Well, before we go to Barry, let's frame what is a dispatch.
I mean, yeah, dispatch is doing more with less. It's watching perhaps like a slate, maybe like probably like a wavelengths, and watching everything in there, and spending that much more of your time and that much more of your energy writing something that's, say, I don't know, 800 to 1,000 words, and getting paid probably what you would have gotten paid for a 150-word capsule. That's the economics of kind of journalism today. I mean, because a decade ago, in Toronto, the capsule market was pretty competitive and fierce. We had two very strong alt weeklies that did capsules for TIFF every year. The Toronto Star did it, we did it. The Sun, I guess, kind of got on that game. The National Post did it as well. There was a competition, and there was a spirit. You wanted to be the one that covered the most, and a lot, that paid, not overly well for freelancers, but it was a pretty consistent source of revenue, and a great way to get also your name in the door. And then there was CinemaScope as well, which finally kind of gave up the ghost earlier this year, and probably was the most ambitious in its tastes and breadth of coverage. And the economics got to it, as with everything else.
I think one of the distinctions here that we sort of just know, but I just want to call out, and I want to look to Jeremy for his thoughts. TIFF is a public festival, which is a little bit different than some other festivals, and so there are sort of different needs, there are different audiences, there are different stakeholders, there are a lot of different things. So maybe Jeremy, you could speak to, we're talking about capsule reviews for many, many different readers. From your perspective, where could we go, right? If we've moved away from capsule reviews, whether for the public or for industry, what do we replace it with?
Well, that's a horrible, horrible thought, isn't it? To move away from capsule reviews. I mean, but it's true, and I think you have to start being selective, and that's a very difficult process, because before you've seen films, how do you know which ones you want to highlight? We don't do that. We publish a TIFF special magazine, print magazine, which also goes online on the website, and we write capsule summaries, I suppose you'd call them, of every film in selection here, about 80, 100 words on each. And we're not at that place right now where we need to make that decision, and we actually try to be as comprehensive as we can in our reviews too. I mean, switching to another festival in Cannes, for example, I think we reviewed every film. And that's the goal. Again, it serves a purpose for the industry, but there's going to have to be a decision made about prioritizing, and that will be different based on everybody's MO, everybody's readership. We do that already with reviews. We used to write a lot of filmmaker reviews. When I would come, even 10 years ago, we would do a lot of filmmaker reviews before we'd seen the film. We might see them in Los Angeles or London and then write the film because you want to do an interview and you've seen the film. And now we tend to move away from that. And we've done a few. I've done one interview with the filmmakers of Heretic, the Hugh Grant horror movie. And my colleagues in France and London have written a few reviews of UK films. But our attitude is to wait and see which film at the festival pops and which one really gets people talking. And then I'll scramble and see if we can get an interview with the filmmakers on the ground. So it's just about trying to prioritize whatever is needed by your core audience, and then see what people are talking about and try to react quickly on the ground.
Let's move beyond festivals for a second and maybe talk a bit about reviews in general, film criticism in general, and how it continues to influence or inform audience decisions. Barry and you and I have had some chats over the years about what we've been calling the democratization of opinion, and there was a time when many of us would look for a film review to help us make a very specific decision. We can get those opinions now from many, many, many sources. Maybe we could talk a little bit, Barry, on your sort of perspective on being a film critic, but also being out there in the world on social channels, expressing your opinion, maybe not professionally, but your personal opinion as well.
Yeah, I mean, I think there are many facets to that democratization of opinion and coverage, because tweets or X's or whatever can travel so wide, so fast, so unpredictably, and have so much more of an outsized impression than a traditional review in a mainstream publication. It happens all the time. And some content is less accessible. You know, publications have paywalls and they have subscription plans, and you know, not everybody is going to be making the leap over that garden to read that content. So, you know, from my perspective, I think a review that the Globe runs, when we decide to review something, because we just, you know, we obviously cannot review everything. And I'm talking outside of the festival environment. I'm talking the general release kind of market. I mean, in Toronto, you know, it's an incredibly fruitful one. Every weekend, there's probably 5 to 10 titles if you really want to get down to it. And so what we kind of decide to review and cover, I mean, that kind of already gives it something of a weight, whether that's a good review or a bad review. And then there are other things that we just don't get to, and then maybe I'll make a tossed-off tweet about, or you know, kind of let it travel like that. And then there's the whole letterboxed situation, which I feel I'm personally just really dipping a toe into right now, having kind of watched it develop from afar, a little nervously and scared. And then there's the film TikTok, which I'm terrified about, and you know, I get my TikTok videos like most people my age, which I feel is through Instagram Reels a month later. So, but you cannot ignore the fact that there is conversation. People want to know about film, whether it's good or bad, and people put weight in other people's opinions and kind of places of authority. So that's heartening to me, that people want to hear intelligent, smart criticism, informed criticism. How it spreads and how people can make a living doing that is an entirely different matter.
Oh, that was really loud. Yeah. You know, I think I don't go on TikTok because I have little sisters, and that's for them. That's not for me. I feel that we should be on separate social medias. But I guess as a critic, I feel like I'm like stumping for my job. So I'm trying to figure out the right way to say this, but whenever that content does cross over and I see it, a lot of it is just not really that well informed. And I understand that people want to, you know, you see somebody you like, you see an influencer, you see that they like something. And if they like it, it's like, okay, if I like it, then I have something in common with this person. And that's, you know, that's a nice parasocial connection, I suppose, but it doesn't really last. It doesn't really, there's no substance to it. You know, when I write pieces, when I review films, when I write about filmmakers, I make a habit of, you know, paying attention to their filmographies, looking for different like trends in their work. You know, I pay attention to the past, the present, you know, where an artist has gone, and the perspective of that, and also the perspective of whatever older films this filmmaker might be pulling from. And all of that is necessary in the sense that it's very easy to forget all of these things. There's not like a very, especially with streaming, where not everything is available. And so I think that, and I don't know, I feel like it's like making people eat their vegetables, asking them to read, but I really think that they should.
Saffron.
I think I'm also incredibly skeptical of TikTok, of Letterboxd, while I can acknowledge that, of course, I think it's like kind of objectively a good thing to broaden the sort of voices that we're letting into this landscape. However, I do think that there is a phenomenal loss at the level of language. I think that film criticism and having a distinct critical voice, and I neglected to mention this earlier, but that's something that also comes from the loss of capsules, is like, as a young critic, developing a critical voice, writing on multiple films in a short period of time, that gets lost. And I think that as criticism gets increasingly audiovisual, or we see that kind of being rewarded in some ways, or like pull quotes coming from Twitter or X or whatever, there is, I think, both a sense that the profession is a bit in jeopardy and people who are trying to make a living doing it full time, as well as the way that criticism has kind of always traveled through written language.
Yeah, absolutely. I'm trying to think of something positive to say, you know?
Yeah, sorry about that.
No, you're fine.
I want to be clear, I'm not advocating for the TikTokification of film criticism.
Oh, no,
at
I didn't
all.
think that you were. I think that you're being very diplomatic.
Print journalism, print film journalism is at a real inflection point, if it hasn't already passed that inflection point. And we have to at least acknowledge how people are getting their opinions and views formed. Can we meet them somewhere within that platform? Because otherwise we risk losing those audiences permanently.
I think also you see, from my point of view, when you're looking at the business, the adoption of some of these social platforms as a way of promoting a film, even the way you see sales agents maybe occasionally talking about it that way. I mean, Barry referenced Letterboxd, and like you, I'm just starting to explore what that is. But I'm hearing more and more from sales agents who are people who are involved in financing independent movies and selling territory rights as a way of doing that, referencing Letterboxd, for example, as a point. And they're trying to find a way of appealing to maybe the audience they think will like that film. But there is an overall contraction and definitely a lack of intellectual rigor, for sure, not just in reviewing, but I think in analysis, in film journalism generally. And everyone is stuck in that vortex. It's very hard to get out of it.
It's really interesting because I think what's sort of crystallizing here is it's an oversimplification of, if you like a thing, if you like one thing, you might like this other thing. And Jourdain, you said it earlier with influencers, right? If this influencer likes it, then maybe I'll like it, which absolutely removes the individual's opportunity to learn from someone else.
Well, yeah, and I feel that influencer culture has also created this obsession with consensus. And I noticed this too. I've been called an influencer, which I'm not. But sometimes I'll say that I'll really like a film and I'll express that interest. Because I am on Letterboxd, and I do enjoy Letterboxd, and I think it's a very useful tool, and it's very helpful for my work in terms of like research. I use it for research a lot of the time, and I don't really talk to people on there or anything like that. I just lost the train of my thought. Where was I? Consensus. Okay, thank you. Thank you so much. Yeah, the thing about consensus is that, you know, we want people to be able to develop their own personal tastes and to, you know, they watch a film, they watch another film, they get an actual interest in cinema that's rooted in themselves and what they're interested in. I don't really need someone to like a movie because I said that I liked the movie. I said that I liked the movie. I'm a completely different person from you. Why do you care? I would much rather someone, you know, read a piece on it and realize, you know, maybe they watch the movie, maybe they don't like it, they read the piece, they're realizing I understand exactly what the merits of this film are, but it's still not for me, you know? Like the more complicated answer, the like or dislike is, I rail about this a lot on Twitter when people where I'm just like, there's something more interesting than whether you like or dislike something. It's doing other things. It's an entire film. People put it together, you know, there's a score. What do you think about that? There's the cinematography. What do you think about that? Like, it's not just like, I see this actor that I like in it and they did a thing that I like, so I like the movie. That simplification and just the need to everybody to agree I don't think is particularly necessary.
I mean, you spoke about some of the other, some of the elements of a film, right? It's not just one thing. So it just made me think, is there anything we can learn from other industries in how they're dealing, other industries, non-entertainment, and how they're dealing with their journalists, right? And their sort of criticism. Maybe Barry, Saffron, some thoughts? Music?
I mean, I think it's a very similar kind of landscape. I mean, if not worse. I think kind of film journalism still has that very much cachet of readership, whether it's the more intellectual reader who wants to learn about international cinema, art house fare, foreign language stuff, independent, or somebody who's just really like blockbuster craze, which obviously there are a lot of people in there because that's a very big business. I mean, if this was a books journalism panel, I think the mood would be like beyond, like subterranean, because that's just that's been hollowed out so much more deeply. So it's, for culture journalism, no matter the medium, it's a very serious point. Who are going to be the next generation of writers who are coming into this field who can manage to support themselves? It's incredibly perilous, incredibly.
And I do think that there is a market for, a lot of these companies are trying to, I mean, that's just me talking about capitalism, make more and continue to raise that revenue as opposed to just sustaining something. I think that there's so much to be said about just being able to sustain a publication and keep people paid and pay them well and maybe be able to, increase their rates as opposed to constantly trying to become a bigger thing than it is. I think that that's a huge issue, which, I mean, we're on the other side of that, so.
I wanted to sprinkle off something that Barry, you just said. For these new emerging journalists coming up now, what does the future look like for them? And Saffron, I thought I'd look to you as someone who is newer, not new, but you have, your experience is quite different coming into this than Barry's, for example. What has it been like starting this path, starting on this journey? Surprises, shocks along the way?
Many. I think it's strange. So I started working as a freelance critic when I was 17. So the landscape then and what was accessible to me as a teenager is very different than what I'm doing now. So I'm 7 years into this, but I feel like I'm 3 real professional years into it. The reality is I hear a lot of anecdotes from friends and mentors who have been in this industry for a long time who say, yeah, well, you doing what you were doing, like what you're doing now 20 years ago would have been fine. You could have made a living doing that. Meanwhile, I'm kind of cobbling things together as an academic through academic stipends, and then as a writer, as a freelance writer, as a film programmer, and I do my bouts every now and then in retail. Like it's not super glamorous. Not that I think it ever really was. I think it's always an industry that's been a little bit in peril. But I think that my surprises kind of keep coming, where it's like it's always in flux. I always have to be ready to do different kinds of work, to take on work that I otherwise, wouldn't really think that I would be doing at this stage in my career. And that can be the more startling aspect of it.
I was going to ask both you, Saffron and Jourdain, and you just mentioned, I mean, you are a film critic. You're also a programmer. Jourdain as well. Maybe out of necessity, maybe intentional, but how does one inform the other? How does one influence the other? And is that a long-term plan, or again, intentional or not?
I first got into programming because I thought that it would be more stable, which joke's on me on that, but it is, I mean, it's a great way for me to continue to do the work that I want to do. And, you know, the thing about writing reviews is just that the rates keep on getting lower and lower over time. So programming is a way for me to experience films, you know, kind of like set up things, do work that takes less writing is what I mean. Do work that takes less writing, but that also keeps me active in front of people in the scene, and also reminds me periodically why I do this and how much I'll show something that I really love in 35 millimeter, and it's, you know, I might not get any money for doing that, but I really enjoyed it. You know, it's important to me.
Saffron.
I agree very much. I think programming was something that I always wanted to do. I, have frequented TIFF for a long time. I think TIFF Wavelengths was the first program that really inspired me to kind of get into watching more experimental film, hopefully programming more experimental film. But it also did emerge kind of out of necessity, where I was like, I would love to be in the scene still, rather than kind of like fluctuating in and out of it. But also writing is an incredibly solitary task. I think I've gotten much better at it in the last year, and at kind of managing my time and not letting it kind of pile up and feel really overwhelming. But in the past, it's like it's a solitary job. You don't get a lot of praise for it. It can be a little bit thankless. So it is nice periodically to show a movie and have a crowd of people there who are excited to talk about it. And it's driven by the same kind of principles that my writing would be driven by, because I think that there is like a kind of like a sell me this pen logic to criticism, where I'm always trying to explain to people why I do it, or I'm in one way or another, through promotion, through whatever, kind of like begging people to read what I'm writing. But I think it's a lot easier for people to show up to a movie and see the film object that I might be talking about, that I'll introduce, that I'm still imparting some level of criticism onto, but I'm just kind of rerouting it in a way that's a little bit more communal and a little bit more accessible.
Yeah. I'm gonna ask Jeremy, what would you don't program films, but what would you be doing beyond what you're doing now?
Well, besides writing the novel.
Besides writing a novel.
Won't go anywhere. What would I be doing? Well, I was a sports reporter in London before I moved to LA. That's always been another option that I would happily have done. But I don't think I can. I've always been a reporter. I mean, I've always been a reporter. I don't really know what else I could do. You know, it's something I love doing. I love to talk to people and hear what they're doing and contribute to our knowledge or understanding of an area. That's really my thing. I mean, I don't know. I honestly don't know what else I would do.
That's kind of what I wanted to get at, actually. And it is a thing, right? This isn't something that any of you fell into because you just kind of was like looking for some fun work. It is truly a profession. It's a calling for many. So I guess a broader question, where do you see it going? And I'm going to go one by one. Where do you see, what you are doing now going in the next 5-10 years?
For me, in the space that I'm in, I see it becoming much more homogenized. It's all very corporatized, and there's a lot riding for studios on the success or otherwise of a film. So the messaging that comes from the head office through their corporate communications team is they're looking for allies. I mean, everyone looks for allies in art, but the dissenting voices are not welcome. It's very hard to pierce through the PR machine that is suffocating the film industry. And it's when we were talking earlier about how we think our jobs have changed. For me, I've been in journalism for, more than 20 odd years. It was much easier to get access to people years ago. And I write about Latin America, South America. So when I'm in that region speaking to filmmakers, it's very easy to get hold of filmmakers, even some of the biggest filmmakers in those countries. But in Hollywood, it's nigh on impossible. You'll get to speak to them, but you have to go through lots of checks and balances. And there are certain questions that they don't want you to ask. Some publicists will come to you and ask you not to ask a certain question before the interview. And that's getting harder. So I see, and as trade press, we certainly hunt like a pack and we're all after the same stories. There's a lot of talk here about The Apprentice, the Donald Trump film, which is in TIFF. Megalopolis, which has had a really rough ride, even before Cannes. That's a thing. Everyone's writing about the AI trailer, and that's snafu, and all these kinds of things. So I see it becoming even more homogenized. I think independent voices are really important. I think critics are incredibly important, and so are programmers, because they bring us new voices. So it's a fight. It's a fight that's been going on for years. It's a fight for information between journalists and the companies and the publicists who represent those companies. So I think the two become even more bifurcated.
Jourdain, your thoughts?
You mentioned AI, and I almost just cringed. Was it an AI trailer? Was that? Oh.
For the Megalopolis, the second trailer, that was involved. Yes.
Oh my gosh. Okay. You know, every once in a while, I have a group chat of film critics where we all just kind of like, you know, it can be positive. We talk about movies, we talk about work, we talk about editors and stuff, but every once in a while we get into this like doom spiral where it's just like our job is fake and no one cares. And we imagine making a magazine that it's like we're going to bring all of the people who can write and we're going to pay them and we're going to fund it some kind of way. And it's never, we came up with a name and everything and we haven't done it, but I almost feel like it might be time to kind of return to just making smaller things, because as these companies, they keep on coming together and the layoffs, which are constant. I mean, that's part of it, is that I've never been staffed anywhere, but I get to watch my friends get laid off over and over again, and I almost wonder, like, would it feel better if I was staffed and laid off so that I could be part of this communal experience of being laid off, as opposed to just constantly like freelancing and just being like, oh guys, that sucks. I really don't know the answer. I want to start a magazine. Sometimes I'm just like, what's the point? I have no idea, honestly.
Please do it.
Oh, well, thank you. I got one vote of confidence.
Yeah, this is my fourth film criticism journalism panel this year. They're all similarly bleak. Like, they all kind of go in this direction where we're kind of becoming obsolete and like nobody cares. But then at the same time, I don't want to be bleak. Like, there's an incredible amount of people here who I assume are here because they're interested and because there is something keeping you invested or attached to criticism. Maybe you want to write criticism. So I don't want to be completely demoralizing, but I am nervous. I'm very scared seeing how promotional film criticism has become and how film journalism is kind of just, it's turning into light PR. And we're really seeing that, like we were mentioning, in the ways that access will be denied if there is like a dissenting opinion on a particular film. I have so many stories about this, which I will not tell right now, but come find me later and I'll tell you everything you need to know. And it is really nerve-wracking in that way, but also the only thing that I can really see remedying that are more dissenting voices and more people taking the opportunity to write, to think critically, to think analytically, and that's not to say just write smear pieces on everything, but like think about the films that you're consuming as like a layered experience. Like there's lots of things going into them, and I find that that is the best way to combat this sort of like weird AI landscape we're entering, where it's just like, this is the film, this is what the film is about, and you should watch it. Like I think that there is a structure and there's a language that can be used or can be kind of mobilized against that. but I also don't have an answer. I don't know. I really hope that we keep on chugging and that some wealthy benefactor decides that film criticism is in fact important and wants to fund Jourdain's magazine.
I would love that. Just a celebrity, if there are any celebrities here, would love to talk to you later.
Barry, your thoughts?
Yeah, I'd love to offer some bright spots, but none are really shining out to me at the moment. I mean, it is a very, to reiterate what everybody has said, it's a very distressing situation. I feel that in no short amount of time, the landscape will be a few trades, some of which are housed under the same company, and which are more or less marketing arms. We're already seeing it. And in Canada, it's that much more of a serious, albeit different and nuanced situation. The kind of access games and the dissenting voices will be persona non gratified is a little different because the Canadian industry depends so much on coverage regardless of torque. Not always, but most of the time. But yeah, I mean, for any kind of major US coverage, for us, it has always been a battle, and that battle has been steadily getting harder and harder and harder to the point where I'm like, okay, I give up. So yeah, I don't know, like, there's a real risk out there. And I feel that what everybody in the audience here can do, and what people who are interested in film and culture and journalism about such is, not a lot of people want to hear it, but you have to open your wallets. You have to subscribe. You have to pay for the Substack. You gotta subscribe to that paywall. You gotta Venmo your favorite freelance writers. You've gotta follow them. You've gotta share, but you've gotta financially contribute, because that is what this system runs on now that the advertising model that has sustained print journalism for so many decades prior has completely collapsed. And a lot of people, again, I share stuff all the time, and always there's inevitably a comment like, paywall, can't read it. And I was like, well, that paywall kind of makes it exist. And if that's not there, then it's not going to exist anymore. So good luck getting your content from sponsored influencers, because that's what's going to be left.
What we really need to do is abolish capitalism, but it's just ridiculous.
I was thinking about opening up to the floor for questions. And I see one right in the front row. I don't know if we have mics, so we might just need you to shout.
Okay, that's fine. I actually have a few things that I am curious about. It's not what I was expecting from this panel at all, in terms of content, but I have a lot of thoughts. So film is often used as a catalyst for social narratives and often impact policy change. We've seen that with Roma and the National Domestic Workers Association used it in Congress to create impact. The reason why I bring this up is you guys as critics are looked at as credible voices within the narratives of these films that you're watching. So you do play an incredibly important role in reviewing these films. And so I have a couple of questions for you. Number one, I want you to review the film circuit in terms of accessibility to emerging voices and BIPOC communities and the moves that they're trying to make, because obviously as BIPOC filmmakers, we're trying to bring in new narratives that haven't been told before. And so in your opinion, having gone through the festival circuits, which festivals do you think provide those opportunities? That's my
Can we pause on that question? Because I just want to say thank you for reminding this panel that they are very important. And their voices are very important. So things are, where they are right now, but you continue to be hugely important to this industry. So to answer the question. That's the first one. Okay, let's start there. Sorry, yes. I'm going to try to paraphrase, because I was actually thinking something very similar, because I would say one of the positive things I think that we have been seeing in recent years is there was a time when film critics were sort of similar-ish, and I think we have seen in recent years, we do prioritize and focus on expanding the scope of voices that we are hearing from, that are published, to better reflect all audiences. So I think the question here really was very specific to the film festival circuit, and films from perhaps BIPOC filmmakers, for example. What's the responsibility of a film critic in this situation, in this world of film festival circuits, BIPOC filmmakers trying to get support, right, to sort of move their projects along, move their careers along?
I think it's a very layered question in that, we're having this discussion and I'm complaining about my revenue and I'm complaining about my access to things, but also I am incredibly cognizant of the fact that I am able to be in this position right now in a way that probably 10, 15 years ago would be much more difficult, because there are people who are allowing me access to, editors especially, but who are allowing me access to platforms to write. I do feel that there is a responsibility inherent to BIPOC critics in what they're choosing to cover. I know that I feel a responsibility in making sure. That's part of why I am always trying to kind of prioritize undistributed films by BIPOC directors. With that said, there's a responsibility there and I always want to honor it, but I think that the question often becomes like, as a BIPOC critic, how are you going to support BIPOC films? And I'm like, well, I was already doing that. I think that this should be a question that is branched out to critics broadly and frankly to white critics in terms of how they're going to engage and platform the films, because I, again, am very fortunate. I have a level of institutional access, but I can't quite platform things as a freelance writer. I can do my best to pitch and cover and do what I can, but it's a very delicate ecosystem. I'm relying on other people also feeling the same way.
Yeah, I mean, the thing I'm, as also a freelance critic, is that usually staff gets first dibs on film coverage, and then, I get what they don't want or what they don't understand. That's usually the two things. So oftentimes I am trying to explain to an editor why a film needs to be covered. And sometimes I lose those There's a film that I'm seeing today. I won't say what the title is. That I pitched it to the Hollywood Reporter, and I said we should cover this, and they were just like, we're not sure about this. We haven't heard much about this, and it's like, yeah, you haven't heard about it. That's why I want to cover it, because you haven't heard about it. But it's. And especially because I got into criticism because of a fellowship program that was looking for people like me, different voices. And so when I come to festivals, I'm specifically also looking for people like me. I'm looking for all of the films. I'm looking for the press screenings that aren't really being attended. I want to know what's going on. And the most that I can do, is write a review, and oftentimes, if it's like for a film that I can't get major publishing for, I have to self-publish, which is kind of annoying. But the good thing about, one of the few really good, I shouldn't say few, I shouldn't say that, that's mean. But it's thankfully because of the profile that I am at now, if I talk about a smaller film, people are more likely to pay attention to it, even if I can't seem to get it into these bigger outlets, but I'm definitely trying.
I know you have more questions, but we only have a couple minutes left, and I absolutely want to hear from Barry and Jeremy on this question. So.
Yeah, I mean, on a film festival kind of circuit and just a general release circuit, like, I think we have a huge responsibility to highlight underrepresented filmmakers who are getting that many more chances to make those films, especially in the Canadian circuit, and which I think TIFF does a really great job of highlighting. In terms of the voices who are able to write on that, I make a pretty concerted effort to have a diverse freelance roster of writers. I am on staff, and I'm very privileged and lucky to be able to be on staff. But I have a small pot of money afforded to me to expand coverage and do things that I do not have the bandwidth to do. And I make it a very concerted effort to make sure that the voices who aren't already on staff are able to get some sort of footprint in the door in the print product and online for the Globe. I wish I could do more. I wish I had hiring power and staff power, but I don't. But what power I do have, I do try to exercise it as much as I can. And not just, of course, getting diverse voices to write about diverse movies. I want diverse voices to write about all kinds of movies. I want diverse opinion. I want diverse analysis. I want diverse perspective. And that goes for across genre, budget, language, what have you. And, you know, it's about doing as much as you can with what you have.
Yeah, I agree with what everyone said. I mean, you know, as a middle-class white male, I actually do worry about the lack of diversity in voices, screen and in the trade and what films are getting supported. My main concern, not being a critic or someone who hires, is the profile of the decision makers in the film business. We need more BIPOC and diverse film decision makers and executives championing films to get these things made so that then they can be reviewed. Sundance and many other organizations issue grants and do a lot of support work. You see some more films that are coming out through different lenses at festivals, but the work that's done from the perspective of the industry, financing films, saying yes to greenlighting films, supporting films that are made on a shoestring and bringing them into the system, that's what I'm interested in as a news reporter. That's something you want to see more of.
I want to thank Barry, Saffron, Jourdain, and Jeremy for sharing their insights on many topics within the larger topic of film journalism. I know firsthand what schedules look like on the first Friday of TIFF, so I appreciate your time. I appreciate the question. I appreciate you being here. Thank you. I do feel like we only scratched the surface of some topics, so maybe there's a 2.0 in the future, but appreciate everyone being here. More great panels to follow this afternoon, so hope you can stick around and have a great TIFF.